Welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. Today we're joined by filmmaker, cinematographer, photographer, editor, podcaster, Mike Pecci. His podcast, In Love with the Process, deals with a whole bunch of different things. He talks to writers, directors, all sorts of people, comic book writers, musicians, kind of sort of what I do in a way. Not the same setup, but yeah, so welcome to the show, Mike. We had some technical snafus and we're doing this via my phone on 5G for the first time. So this is gonna be interesting. And thank God for 5G though.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
So
I,
how you doing?
it's good, man. I'm good. It's nice to be here. It's nice to sit down and chat with you. And yeah, it's nice to talk to a fellow podcaster. So it's
Yeah,
good.
no, I'm glad you're on. And as I was saying before we got cut off by Xfinity's kind of lackluster service. Uh, I discovered your show by the fact that you had on filmmaker Joe Carnahan, who's a friend of the show. He's done the show twice, and I got to know Joe over the years. And he posted on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, I always like hearing Joe on talk about anything because he's animated, he's fun.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
great. Yeah, it's
but
great.
in the course of that, I got to know about you, and I really liked your style. I liked how you presented things, and you were talking about your film, your short film, 12 kilometers or 12 km, and it got me really interested because the thing that intrigued me the most is that you were doing something that I know people still do, but it's in smaller supply now. And the
Mhm.
last time I really remember somebody talking about it to the effect, to the amount that you did about doing practical effects in camera was Coppola back when he did Dracula.
Yes,
It's like
yes,
that was I mean that came out the same year I think as Jurassic Park. So for him to go very old school, and I still think that's an incredible. It's a little bit. Oh, hold on, it's a little bit of a flawed film in some regards. It's not, you know, perfect by any means, but it's bold. It tries a lot of neat crap. So I was like, damn, if it's even half as cool as Dracula was, I'm in. So I got to. There's a whole thing. We can either tell the people here now about how to see 12 km, or I could just direct them to your show where you tell them there. Which would you prefer?
we could do it either. I mean, you could do it if you go to my show. There's a lot of cheat codes on the show, but you can do it now. We can do it now if you want to do
Yeah.
it.
So basically, how I found out was listening to the show, and he offers this thing where you name three of your favorite horror films, because 12 km is essentially a horror film. Um, and if I guess you bestow the people's opinion, you give them a link to see the film, which is unreleased, and you're hoping to use as a springboard to actually make a feature of it.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah. It's funny. It's funny. Like, look, I did. So I shot this movie back in 2016. So this movie's been around for a while, and shot it back then, and it was never going to be released to the public. It was
Yeah.
always something that was a proof of concept for a feature script. And if you're a director that's going out, if you're even though I've been directing for 20 something years, if you're considered a first time director where you're going out to do this stuff, it's really difficult to get executives to read a script and understand your tone and understand your vibe. And
Mm.
so the smart thing to do is to create a proof of concept film, which really sort of lays out that whole tone and vibe. So when they watch the short, they get it in their head and they go, oh, this motherfucker likes to do this and this and this and this. So then when they're reading the script, they go, got it. Instead of them like picking up the script cold and going, this reminds me of, Event Horizon. And so then they're putting Event Horizon in their head when they're reading the script. And then they get in the room with me and I'm like, no, it's not Event Horizon. So
Yeah.
proof of concept is pretty much the purpose of it. We shot this film, and it ended up getting traction out here in Los Angeles, and got me in the rooms with like all the big producers, like Sam Raimi's people and like Michael Bay's people, and ended up getting me in the space with Ridley Scott and Ridley Scott's people, and they really liked the movie, and so they started to develop it with us. So we started to do the feature with Ridley. Now, mission accomplished, right? Like I did the movie, mission accomplished. I don't necessarily need this thing to go public. And I had just been on other people's shows. Like I'd do the podcast and I would talk about it to my fans on the podcast and say to them, like, if you want to see the movie, send me your 3 favorite horror movies. Because I like to engage with people. It's like an engagement thing. I think when you release stuff on the internet and you just dump stuff on fucking YouTube, it just disappears into a sea of mediocrity and bullshit. It's like, I don't want someone going through watching, like drooling and watching cats like chase each other around in a fucking bedroom and tune into my movie right after that. It's like being on Netflix. But, there sort of hits this point with me where the reason I make movies is I like to be engaged with an audience, and I like to go to see movies with people. And if you ever come to see a movie that I screen, I'm usually standing there at the front door and shaking everybody's hands when they come into the space. And it's like, I like to know who these folks are and who it is that I'm going to try to scare or whatever it is I do. And so when I started to do this online, it was more for just my fans and for the folks that listen to the podcast, where I was like, yeah, send me 3 favorite horror movies, we'll chat, and then I'll send you a link, you know? And I was going on other people's shows, right? And I had these guys over at, I think it was Corridor's podcast that really pushed it. I went over to see them, and they had all seen the movie, and they were talking about it. And they said, well, how can our fans see it? And I was kind of being a dick. And I was just like, if I like your movies, then sure, I'll send you the thing. And it was just me being funny. And one of their fans did it, went through the whole process of it, and then he made a video explaining it. And in his video, he ended the video with, is this genius or is this pretentious? Which was genius on his part, because now you're asking that question of you know, armchair warriors. And so every armchair warrior was like, fuck this guy, it's pretentious, it's pretentious. And what people don't realize is that negativity gets you so much traffic. And so because of all their negativity, the fucking clip went viral. And, you know, I woke up the next day with thousands and thousands and thousands of DMs that I have to answer, that are people sending me their, you know, their horror movies. And yes, I answer them. I'm the guy that sends the shit out. I spend hours a day just doing this when I can. And I get to know each and every person that sees it. And some people love it. Some people hate it. But for me, I like the engagement. I love people. Like people that don't love it, I love that shit. That's so much fun to me. So,
there was something you said on the show with Joe that you were I don't know where, but you were posting the day maybe it was Instagram where you were posting the negative reviews.
Yeah. I mean, so what's interesting about it is that as a filmmaker, and you're living in this sort of digital existence, right? And according to everybody that makes movies, executives, studios, they're trend chasers. That's essentially what they do. So they're hunting for the easiest, simplest path of no resistance that will give them like ridiculous returns. And I think that's why horror is still a huge thing, because there's this whole theory that you can make a horror film for no money and then make $900 million on a $2 million investment. And it's proven. I mean, look at like all these movies that are out, like what's the fucking female robot movie?
Smile,
or like
Megan,
Megan. So it's been proven that that's their method. And I like to make what I consider to be cosmic horror and sort of adventure horror. That's always been my thing. It's never a horror movie that's based on an elevator pitch. It's not like, what happens if you're possessed and then everybody smiles evilly at you? And most of these pitches are really great for marketing, right? You know, you've got Barbarian, like Airbnb goes wrong. You know, it's like, okay, that's a fucking TikTok post, you know? And with the stuff that we do, it's a bit more cerebral and it's a bit more nuanced. And I'm a bigger fan of long running scares than I am of jump scares. I think jump scares are a tool that I will sparingly use. But so what I make essentially is kind of the opposite of what the studio thinks would be successful. And so the byproduct of me doing it this way is that I'm able to prove to the studios, look, I've got 14, 15-year-old girls that are asking me to see a movie about a bunch of old Russian dudes that speak in Russian, and they love it. And they write reviews and they post about that stuff. So the research for it, the research and development that I get out of doing it this way is very useful for me. If anything, just helps me stay confident when I go into this room and I say to them, like, hey, I want to do a remake of The Thing. And the executives are like, well, no one gives a shit about The Thing. And I go, well, on contraire, I've got fucking 100,000 lists from people that The Thing is number 2 or number 1 on their lists. And these are young people. So where the fuck are you getting your data from?
Yeah.
So like it's been really cool, man. It's been cool for that whole process.
Yeah, and well, I mean, as a side note, I mean, the other problem with kind of redoing The Thing at this point is that horrible remake that, even though it's a remake of another film, that horrible. I say it's horrible. I honestly haven't seen it. It took me decades to finally see The Thing, because it was like when I saw The Exorcist. It was like, okay, I have to finally decide to watch something that I've heard everyone talk about how great they are. I mean, you have the history with, like, especially The Exorcist, where people were literally passing out and stuff, and it was just too much because they couldn't handle. And the thing I was surprised about both films is how current and vital they still were. I was genuinely unnerved by The Thing in many ways, and I was genuinely freaked out by The Exorcist. And this is talking, I saw the film nearly 50 years after it came out.
Yeah.
So I've seen all of these other horror films, and like an OG classic is still able to freak me the fuck out is pretty amazing, you know.
Well, I think that both those movies are properties that aren't based on a very sort of, disposable, fast fashion version of a pitch. So like you're dealing with The Thing, which at its core is really a movie about not being able to trust folks. It's very much a movie from that era of the Cold War and everything else. And it became incredibly relevant again with COVID, and with how people were exchanging with their friends and people that, are you vaxxed and are you not vaxxed? And so like all that stuff became incredibly relevant again. And I think that John Carpenter knew that he was tapping into a part of our psyche that is ingrained in us generationally. It doesn't make a difference if you were born in the 20s or if you're born currently. Human beings themselves are very selfish at heart, and we always have our best interest in mind. And at the end of the day, if you're in a room with a bunch of people that could be your friends, and you can use the excuse of like, well, one of these is a monster, like it's fascinating to see how they turn on each other so quickly.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I think that movie is a wonderful stage play. And it's the effects in it may seem dated, but fuck that. No, they're not dated. Here's the thing that I tell people in general. Movies are experiences, and they're only as good as you allow them to be. So like if you go to sit down and watch a movie and you bring all sorts of preconceived bullshit, if you were just in a fight with your girlfriend and you try to sit down and watch an old black and white movie, you're not going to fucking like it, man. But if you, like, it's the same thing if you go to Disney World or Universal Studios. I was there for their horror night at Halloween, and all it is a fucking tent that they set up in a parking lot somewhere with some twists and turns and people that come out of closets with for shit and strobe lights.
Yeah.
If you go in there cynical, you're just going to walk through the whole thing going, there's a motherfucker in overalls and a knife. Who gives a shit? But if you're in the mindset to go like, I know that this isn't real, but what if it is? Or like you change your perception before you go through that experience, you enjoy it more. You come out of the back end going like, wow, I opened myself up and I allowed myself to really like this fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we have such a gross overstocking of riches when it comes to content right now. There's so much stuff to watch. There's so many places to watch it that I think that people are just sort of lethargically sitting back and going, "Give me." And I get this from folks when I ask them to engage with me before they get my short. I was just having fun commenting on a lot of the negative comments last night, and these fucking people who are like, how dare you ask me to do anything for this? You should just give it to me. And I'm like, of course, you are a part of this time period right now where you don't even have to get off the fucking couch to go get your food. You'll overpay some fucking Uber driver to go into McDonald's and get a bag of food to bring to you to your doorstep. Like, we're about a stage away from an app where they'll actually come in and open your mouth for you and cram the fucking cheeseburger in. And then, you know, make you eat it. So like, I get it, man. I get it. I think that what is exciting about making horror movies is that it's something that you're engaging as a filmmaker and as an artist. I'm engaging with the audience. Like, I want to see if all of these things that I've done behind the scenes make you feel something. Like, and I get a rush out of that. Like, if we're sitting in the audience and like we've done all this technique to push the audience down this hallway to a doorway that someone has to open, and if they're all going like, then it's great to see all that technique doing that. So why the fuck would I not want to be engaged with you? I mean, that's otherwise it's like being a chef for takeout food. Where you just, here you go. I have no idea how anybody's responding or reacting or doing anything to it. I'm just sending this out. Fuck that, man. That's not why I'm a filmmaker, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's interesting to see people on there like, where's my movie? And it's like, dude, just calm down. It's one guy. It's like, if you had the ability to know that you had to go through a process, you also have to know that it's just one guy doing it. It's not a staff, you know, and it's for an unreleased short horror film. There's not a studio behind it. There's not, you know, like interns and all, you know, it's like, have some fucking, but people don't, and you know, I get impatient too. And I sometimes fly off the handle and I forget things and I go off, and we all do it, but it's like, I feel like it's maybe because I'm older and maybe because I've gone through that. Like at the start of the internet, I used to be on message boards and I used to just let everything fly and be a dick if I wanted to. And then I kind of started, you know, maturing, you know, because we were all maturing as people of a certain age. We're all kind of getting to know what the hell the limits of the internet were. And unfortunately, people are not maturing at all. They just still think it's, you know, it's a fucking, you know, Wild West town where you can do and say whatever you want, and without thinking like, what would I do if this person were right here, you know? And the discourse has changed, has dropped dramatically. People don't even attempt to have a discourse. They just think that their opinion's all that matters, and who gives a fuck? You know, I'll be as nasty as I want.
Well, what's interesting about it, there's a bunch of things that are fascinating about this, but you're dealing with an entire community or entire generation of people that are consistently marketed to. I would argue that as soon as you squeeze yourself out of your mom, you're staring at the logo on the glove of the fucking doctor that pulls you out. Like, we're just consistently inundated with marketing everywhere we look. I can't even look around in the space that I'm in right now and not see 40 fucking logos. Like, it's everywhere. And the giant companies and the giant corporations that we're consistently dealing with are taking advantage of us all the fucking time. And the difference is, with me, I'm the person that you can actually talk to. instead of like, getting pissed off at fucking Apple and then putting you on like some sort of text thread that maybe you'll get back to in like 6 weeks. You
Yeah.
physically communicate with me. And I think that folks forget that the reason I do this and what you really want is this communication, is this ability to talk to the people that are making your stuff and putting your stuff out there. I mean, that's what fucking social media is for. That's what Instagram is for, is to actually communicate with folks. And so when I have these conversations with these people, and a lot of them are just like passively putting this stuff out there, where they're like, fuck this guy, or this is a dumb idea. And then I just write to them and I go, hey, do you want to see it? Instantly, their attitude changes. Every one of them. Their attitude goes from like being passive to like, oh shit, yeah, can I see it? And then I send it to them. And then they write back to me and they go, dude, I didn't understand what this thing was. What does this thing mean? And then we have a conversation. They go, holy fuck, I didn't know that I can have a conversation with someone that does this stuff. And they're like, how do you find the time to do this? I go, barely.
Yeah.
But it's important for this exchange, because I think there's this misconception that Hollywood directors and people out there, yes, we're busy when we're working, but there's a whole period of time where we're not fucking busy, where we're sitting around and we're waiting for some executive asshole in an office somewhere to suddenly decide that our idea is worth making, and then it gets greenlit, and then they're up our ass to get it done quickly. But I'd say 90% of my life is not making movies. 90% of my life is meeting people, it's convincing people, it's doing location scouts, it's story stuff. And then there's a big piece of it that is this, which is audience building and audience interaction. And there's something really nice about, fuck all these corporations that file themselves as individuals. And I get emails from like some giant corporates like, hey, Michael, it was a rough year last year. And I'm like, fuck you. You're like a whole boardroom full of assholes that don't give a fuck about me. And I get that. So I think a lot of people that come with that negative energy are feeling that, where it's like, we're being taken advantage of all the time. And how's this guy fucking me over? And I'm an East Coaster. I come from Boston, so I'm very cynical. There's this great moment out here in LA where my girlfriend and I were driving through, I forget where we were, Silver Lake or something. We're driving through, and there's this guy standing on the side of the road, and he's got this sign, he's spinning the sign, and I'm like, what's this guy selling? And we drive by, and it says, have a nice day. That's all it says on the sign.
Not selling anything.
And I go, and I look at the guy and I go, this asshole, what the fuck? And that's the first thing I thought was like, what the fuck? He's got like a trap door around him or something. So you get close to him with this thing.
Yeah, it's Pennywise.
Yeah. So like, I get it, man. I totally get it. So when I post these negative reviews, oftentimes I think it's just funny to see what people say when they're in their space. But then at the same token, I'm never upset with them. I'm just like, look, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit about you're from Boston. How did you decide to get, well, this was the one, see, I do a fair amount of preparation as much as I can, and I don't write down questions, but a lot of times I'll go to bed and my brain will not quite shut off. So I'll start thinking about, hell, I'll start imagining interviews with people I want to talk to and all the shit I wanted to ask them. But with you, there were two questions I had, and they're kind of similar, but they're different too. So basically, what was the thing what was something that made you want to become a filmmaker? And also, what was the reason for actually becoming a filmmaker? So the difference is people will get inspired by things all the time and say, oh, I want to do that. But then life gets in the way. Like my life, I wanted to write scripts since I was a teenager, and I only just finished my first one the last day of the last year. So, so I there was a point where I decided I wasn't, or consciously, unconsciously, whatever, decided not to become a screenwriter. You know what I mean? So there's a point where you make that decision, like, I'm gonna fucking do this and I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah, there is, man. Like, I think that Well, there's a lot of levels to this. Let me start at the beginning. I originally, as a kid, I wanted to be a comic book artist.
Okay.
And so I read comic books a lot because like, I hated reading. And so my mom, like, out of desperation, went out one day and threw down a bunch of comic books in front of me. And she's like, these have pictures in them. At least read these. And so as a kid, I started to go through comic books. I really fell in love with the ability to tell a story in a flat 2D frame. And the thing that's very magical about comic books is that the drawings, and if they're done well, the drawings convey this energy that sort of takes your mind into the spaces that exist between panels. So your brain fills in all of that action. So it could be someone swinging for a punch. You're imagining the impact, you're imagining all of that stuff as you get to the next panel. And so I was always really fascinated with that. And so early on as a kid, I would like trace comic book panels and then teach myself stuff. And I went to school for painting and illustration when I was a young kid. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I figured that I would go to art school and learn how to do it, and then that would be my career. So when I applied to art school, I didn't get into any of the places that I applied. And I was like, well, okay, fuck this. And it was like sort of that moment where you're like, well, I guess that's not what I'm going to do. And I happened to be also working in a music store, one of my things that I loved to do as a kid. And I got to know the music industry, and I loved to be that guy that was introducing my friends to new albums and new songs and new stuff. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll get into radio. And so school for radio. And I took, I ended up community college radio show. And it was at like 3 a.m. in the morning. I was sitting with the program director, and he was like, all right, dude, so at the top of the hour, you can play all the CDs marked with a green sticker. And at the bottom of the hour, you could play all the CDs marked with a red sticker. And I was just like, well, what the fuck am I doing here? You know? And luckily, just to take a course to credits, I was taking a film, and this is before the days of YouTube. Thought that Indiana Jones lived in a box in my living room. I just didn't really think about how movies were made or what went into it. I never really thought about that. And I took this film course, and we watched Blade Runner. And the professor was like, so what'd you think of the wardrobe? And I was like, what? You know what I mean? And so then I really had my eyes opened instantly to, oh, fuck, there's someone that's in charge of doing this and this and this and this. Those are jobs. Oh, shit, those are jobs. And I know this seems so stupid now because everybody wants to know how movies are made. Everybody's sort of like, you know, where do you hide the fucking rabbit for your magic tricks? And it's everywhere. But, you know, prior to 2000, that didn't really exist. The super nerds would get VHS tapes or look at behind the scenes on early DVDs and laser discs. But most of us didn't give a shit, which honestly, as a filmmaker, I wish I was part of that audience because they're so much more fun. They're not as cynical. So anyway, I was like, fuck, man, filming does everything I love. It does comic book stuff. It does the music stuff. It's the energy. And I was always a blue collar kid growing up. I was an airplane mechanics assistant for years. And then I was also like house painting and all this shit. So it also combines the blue collar element of crew and all that. And I said, man, this is the shit. And I jumped right in quickly at that point and was like, all right, I'm going to go to a school that's a trade school in New York. I'm going to learn it. And I really didn't look back, man. Like it was pretty quick on that. And then the problem is when you get into it when you're younger, I think, and this is what I talk about on my podcast all the time.
Yeah.
I have a lot of guys and girls that come to me and they go, I don't think I'm out for this business. I don't think I'm cut out for this business. And I go, why not? And they go, well, you know, I've been trying and nothing's really happening. And you know, I just don't think I'm going to make it. And I'm like, well, how long have you been doing it for? And they're like, oh, about a year now. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be doing this shit for 8 years before anybody gives a fuck about you.
Yeah.
So like, this is a long haul game. And the thing about filmmaking is that if you're going to have somebody who thinks they know about, you need to have those experiences. You got to live that life, man. You got to go out there and get dumped. You got to have your parents die. You got to have all this stuff happen to you and experience those things through your shit so that you can convey it in a new way to people. And so, you know, it took me a while. When I got out of film school, I ended up working for corporate stuff. And then I went to doing commercials and doing the whole corporate game. And I fell off of the path to do films pretty quickly, because then it becomes like a revenue stream where you're like, fuck, how do I make money and how do I eat? Years later, when I had my head injury, where I've told the story a bunch of times, but I ended up going ice skating on a date, and I slipped on the ice and I fell and I cracked my skull, and I ended up in intensive care with a hematoma. And the whole process gave me hallucinations. And it was that process that inspired a lot of the stuff that happened with 12 Chem. I was convinced that my inner voice didn't belong to me. And so that event did two things. One, it inspired me. And then two, I had this moment where I'm on my deathbed and they're like, all right, so, you know, you should call your parents. You can't go to sleep, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And I just thought about my life. And I was looking back at all of these pillars in my life, which were projects. It was like, hey, I remember when I did that music video for Kill Switch Engage. I remember when I did this. I remember when I did that. But they were just a couple of pillars here and there. And I'm like, well, what the fuck did I do in the intro? Like, why was the stuff that was in between those pillars not as important as the pillars themselves to me? And so I recovered from the head injury and was like, I'm full throttle into making movies now. Like, I'm not going to waste my time. And there's a piece of me that was like, and I want to learn to respect every bit of the process of everything, because most of my life is spent in between those pillars. And so if my main goal is to be that guy that stands up in front of people in an audience and goes, see what I did? That literally only lasts for like 20 minutes. And then I'm unemployed. So anyway, that's a long story of how I got into it.
No. I appreciate it. You know, I'm sure you talk about somewhere on your show. It's just that I haven't gotten that far, I suppose. And it's harder. Like I kind of do this thing where I want to do a deep dive backwards, but then there's so much, you know, you put out a fair amount of content. You know, you do like quick shows, you do interview shows, which are very in depth, and I dig that. I like doing long, in depth interviews with people, but I also have found that like the stuff that gets more attention tends to be shorter, on my end at least. So I kind of pick and choose. Like, you know, with Joe, I think he and I went like an hour and a half. You know, some people I've gone. I think I talked to Mike Starr, the actor. I think we talked for 2.5 hours, which was ridiculous. You know, it's like, and we were just talking because he lived in Chicago for a while. I think his wife was from here, and he worked and lived here for a while. So because I used to write about the restaurant business, and I kind of still do. There was an intersect because he knew a lot of people in the restaurant business. So it's like sometimes these things just take a life of their own. You know, and sometimes I've got a hard in, hard out because people are a little more on the famous side, which I like. I want to build up to that, but I also want to be able to just go where I want, you know. But I do that thing like that old cliche Hollywood thing where it's like do one for them, do one for you kind of thing. So I try to like pick up people sometimes that maybe I don't know, but I figure at least I'll learn, you know, possibly learn something from them.
Yeah, man.
You know,
I'm pretty similar about a lot of that, man. Like look, I do the show selfishly,
Yeah.
because it enables me to not only meet new people and sort of exchange ideas. And a lot of the stuff that we end up talking on the show about is like, how do they stay happy? How do you survive? Like last year's stuff, probably because it was pre-COVID, it got into like mental health for like anybody that was on the show. I would have
Yeah.
like, large, actors come on the show, and then we'd start talking about like imposter syndrome. And so there was a lot of interesting threads that I would talk to chefs about, and I would talk to the show has thus moved on to be something that I find very useful for me professionally, because I can bring people onto the show that I want to work with, that I would not normally be able to deal with their managements and agents. But if I write to them and I say, hey, I would like to spend 2 hours talking about how cool you are, then
Right.
they're more than happy to come out. And then by the time we're done with it, they're like, hey, I'd like to work on your next piece, or hey, I'd like to do something, because we've made a connection. So
Right.
the podcast is a great tool for me professionally,
Yeah.
and is a great tool for me audience wise and fan base wise, because I get to connect with people. And then there are sponsors and everything else. So it's become a really big part of my life, and it's a something that I'm doing consistently.
Yeah.
And I love it, dude. I think it's great, man. I love talking to people. It's a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
well, it's what's cool about the way you're putting that is different from a lot of people. A lot of people think, and I'm sure you've experienced this, especially if you're not from Hollywood and you go to Hollywood, and I don't purport to know. I know Hollywood in as far as reading, as far as hearing about and things like that. So I have an idea of Hollywood, but the cliche about Hollywood is that a lot of people are phony because they're trying to get something for themselves all the time. So they're transactional. Whereas I think the way you're coming at it is, yeah, it may end up becoming in a way like a transactional thing in a way, but you're coming at it as like, let's see where things go. I think this person does some cool stuff. Maybe after we're done talking, maybe we can do something together. At the very least, you're making connections in a more natural, friendly way, as opposed to I need to check off this box,
Yeah,
this
man. Like,
box, or see, get to meet this person and hound them or whatever the fuck.
dude, so what happens is that like you said, it's just time in, it's experience. So you
Yeah,
start to understand, like I've been a freelancer now for 22 years.
yeah,
And so you start to understand that the worst place to be in is desperate,
yeah.
right? The worst place to be in is a place where you don't have savings, you don't have money to back you up.
Right.
Like I say this to all the young freelancers that listen to my show all the time. Get to the point where you have 6 months worth of rent in your bank account all the time, because that's going to change the way you interact with people. That's going to change the way you negotiate for your work. You're never working from a point of desperation at that point. You're working from a point of like, is this someone that I want to hang out with? Is this someone that I want to spend time with? And then you tend to not only do better work, you tend to have better life experiences.
Yeah.
And I find that I will talk to you, like if we were going to do something together, I would talk to you now. We would have an organic sort of conversation that I want to be a part of. And then 6 months from now, a year from now, I'll get a random email from you going like, hey, there was this thing that happened, and I thought you'd be really interested to be a part of that. And you go, all right. And when you do this long enough, you start to see that that's the way it works. So there's not as much stress on the initial meeting for stuff, because it's like, dude, we may not hang out in person for fucking 6 months. All right,
Yeah.
cool, man. Like, and at that point, you're just like, okay, well, what's this moment about? And what are we talking about now?
Yeah.
And and I think people respect that. And I can honestly say that there isn't a sinister like purpose for me beyond that. And I think that the one thing that I'll cop to is that oftentimes I'll have people on the show that I'm going to talk with that I want to potentially have a long-term
Right.
relationship.
Right.
But that's like going to hang out with someone at a fucking bar, or go, it's the same kind of shit.
Right. Yeah. 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 No, I think what I've gotten so far from your interviews has been, a real sense of down to earthness, um, and honesty. And I especially like you've had these couple episodes that I've heard so far where you're just it's just you talking and you're talking about I mean, the whole thing with in love with the process is the process. It's sometimes it could be like an overused word to some degree on your show, but that's the idea. So it's like it becomes this. I don't want to say mantra, but it kind of has this thing where it's like, okay, yeah, think about it. You got to think about these things. You got to think about what if you did A, what's going to cause, what's going to happen with on B, and then how do I get to the beyond that, and what am I why am I doing the things I'm doing, and are they for the right reasons, are they for the wrong, and you just kind of have this way to you almost sound to me like and I mean this in the best way, a motivational speaker in a way, because you're opening up people's ideas to minds to actually think about what they're doing instead of just be me. As far as what I want in that moment, you got to think about why you want what you want in that moment. And that's something that I think only happens with age. And as somebody that hates getting to be old, I mean, I'm almost 52.
There's nothing wrong.
I no, I know, but it's just like I hate the idea of being old, and I do have that thing where these damn kids and everything, but I know that I was kind of an idiot too, and I had I still have my flaws, my demons, and all that stuff that I'm trying to wrestle. I'm never going to be where I exactly want to be. I know that. I told my ex-wife the other day. I said I think if there's reincarnation, I'm going to get it better the next time.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is with me and my ex-wife, we still talk. She's remarried, and I'm sitting here, and it's exactly the way that she kind of predicted. I was going to regret doing the things I did that pushed us apart. And I'm sitting here, still kind of 7 whatever years later, with regrets, but trying to pick up the pieces and move on so I could be, fulfilled and happy in some way.
Of
you
course.
know um but it's a matter of like not thinking in the moment, and doing whatever you feel like doing, and not thinking about the consequences. That's something that you kind of some people have it together right away. Some people, everybody has their own faults. Some people have like better ways of attacking things than others, but some people take a long time to figure their shit out.
Yes.
So it's a matter of trying to be open, I think, that a lot of people still struggle with.
Well, dude, it's there's a lot there. Like the we live in a culture where we celebrate youth, right? And we take
Yeah.
like very young people and we put them very high pedestal. And I think a lot of that, I can go into a fucking rant on that, but I think a lot of that has to do with how easily manipulative it is to deal with like young kids that haven't had life experiences. So like if you're someone that's fucking take a lot of money out of them, there's a reason why like some of the pop stars are under the age of 20, because they
Yeah.
can. But we put these folks on these high pedestals, and now we like to put them up there. We like to tear them down. We like to judge them. And we live in a time period now, which is like very much the results of cancel culture and the results of, the internet, weekend warrior kind of shit. And we thrive and we get our dopamine rush off of canceling people and fucking pulling people down and tearing people apart. And we've done that for years. We put people
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
pedestals to do that.
Yeah. And
Um,
mind you, that idea is not specific to any political or social side. It's everywhere.
it's true.
Everybody does it, and the people that think that they're ultra liberal, they still do it,
Yeah.
and they wonder why somebody else is doing it. It's like, well, fuck, if you just stopped a second and realize you're fucking doing it too,
Well, I
maybe
mean,
things would be better.
well, but there's this sense of like negativity gets is a larger dopamine rush, no
Yeah.
matter
Yeah.
what activity is, and they've proven this. And we have to become a culture that will not stand for people being quote unquote evil and doing really shitty things. But we also have to be a culture that supports and nourishes the ability to make mistakes and then recover from those mistakes and then improve from those mistakes. Because you're just going to have a whole group of people that are just angry and thrown out of society and afraid of that. And so I think that culturally, what I try to do myself is I try to just be very honest about everything that I go through, because I wish I had it. So our mantra on the show is that this is filmmaking, this is music, this is art without the Instagram filter. So at no point are you going to see me, unless it's a joke, at no point are you going to see me like with a camera on my arms, standing in front of a Lamborghini, hashtagging my best life kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
That doesn't fucking exist. And everybody that's doing that kind of shit, they're spending more time taking pictures to do that shit than they are making good work. And so what I try to do on the show is just be very apparent and transparent about what I'm going through and what I'm dealing with. I mean, I talk about the fact that I went through a really shitty process of trying to get a film made, and that process threw me into therapy. And I had to go into therapy to sort of process how intense that whole thing was. Like, if you listen to me on the show from episode 1, you'll hear in my tone like what I'm going through, and you'll like, you can pinpoint my excitement, my anguish, my depression in all the stuff. And that's because behind the scenes, I'm doing what everybody that listening to the show is doing, which is like, I'm trying to follow my dreams, and I'm coming to some pretty hard realities that I had created for myself when I was a kid. Like, I was like, grew up enamored with like David Fincher and Ridley Scott and all these guys. And at that time, all we had for research was like, maybe we read a book, but those guys were too young to be in books. Or I saw some behind the scenes EPK or something that was promoting their shit. And they were just like, I started to do music videos. And then next thing you know, I'm doing feature films, man, living my best life, and you're just like, as a kid going, well, fuck, that's all I got to do, right? I'll do the music video thing. And so that's how I got into it. I was like, cool, I'll do music videos. I'll do that shit. And this will help me make a movie. And so then that affects everything on multiple levels, where you're then like trying to design your music videos to be cinematic, because you think those music videos will help you sell a movie. And you're also, plugging in and doing things cheap and getting taken advantage of and going through this whole process because you're like, this is for the ultimate goal. Fast forward to when I'm sitting in the office with, Michael Bay's people, they don't give a fuck about my music videos. And they don't give a shit whether or not my music videos are cinematic or not. And you're at that moment when they tell me that, where they're just like, who the fuck cares? Then you're just like, I wish I could go back in time and tell the 22-year-old me that was so hyper convinced that if I spend all this time and energy doing these music videos, that it would help me get a movie. Doesn't do shit. And so what I'm trying to do on the show with everybody that I have on the show, and guests that I have on the show, and I think it happens pretty quickly. You hear it in the first 2 minutes of the show. I just get to a point where I go, I don't want to hear your bullshit. I don't want to hear about your Instagram filtery kind of crap. And I think that most people that come on the show now know, and it's a place for them. It's almost therapy. It's a place for them to come on and go like, all right, here's what's really happening. You can hear it across the board. Like, I'll have cinematographers on that do these television streaming shows, right? And the idea with a lot of younger cinematographers is, if I just get that TV show, I'm set. Like, that's a great situation. And there are young cinematographers that are like, hey, then I get to work the camera all day and I get to do this stuff. But then you talk to these guys and they're like, the schedule is so fucking intense. So they're putting us through the run. I don't even get to work the camera. While they're doing scenes, I'm prepping sets for the next few episodes. So I look at the monitor real quick and I go, okay, great. And I hire a good camera operator, and then I leave. And you're like, well, shit, man, that sounds like it sucks. And they're like, yeah. And then I get run through the mud. And by the time I'm done, I want to kill myself because of how much hard work this was. And there's a lot of young cinematographers that have created their own idea of what this thing is. And they're just like, oh, wow, that's what it's really like. It's like, yeah, so think about it
Yeah.
before you decide that you're going to craft your entire plan around this falsehood, this myth that you've created.
Right.
So,
Well, there's not many places too where, I mean, I think that's what's important about your show. There's not many places where they'll talk about the net, because people in art generally do not like to put out that they had a negative experience. And even if they say something general, they don't want to be specific. Like there was just a Hollywood Reporter cover story or whatever on Sarah Michelle Gellar, and she was talking, the whole thing with Joss Whedon from Buffy the Vampire Slayer on, and she was like, I'm never going to tell that story. And I get that for her. It's like, I get that we all have our things that we will not share publicly with people. But there's also the fear, I think, with telling some of these, unburdening yourself about these stories while you're still working in the business, where, oh shit, if I shit on something, I'm going to piss it's going to get back to so and so. I'm going to piss them off, and they're going to fucking, throw my name through the mud or whatever, and I'm going to be fucked.
well, I mean, let me be clear about it. I'm never on the hunt for clickbait. I should be, but
no, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm never on the hunt for clickbait material. So like if I was to sit down with Sarah to have an episode to talk about stuff, I wouldn't be like, give me the dirt on Joss.
Right.
I honestly don't give a fuck. I think the conversation that I would lean into with her, and I can pretty much guarantee it would probably get on this path, would be like, how do you handle being in this business?
Right.
And like, how do you, as an actor, you're being judged by your physical appearance consistently. Like as a director, and I think this is what a lot of people like, is that I'm also a director, so I work in the business, but I can say to her, like, as a director, I can hide behind my work. Like I can hide behind my films. Like when I walk into a room, people will judge me based upon my art. They won't judge me based upon my personal appearance or based upon like what I said somewhere. I said, so like, what is your internal I would ask her, like, what are your internal defenses for this? And go through this process, because then she can really sort of unburden the stresses around that, feel like there's a sense of connection to those stresses around that. And then the people that are listening to that show would sit there and go like, oh fuck, like I'm gonna probably have to handle that kind of thing. And you don't have to be an actor. This could be you trying
anyone.
to work,
Yeah.
So,
well, in the same spirit, I just saw, like, also in the Hollywood Reporter, I saw Sarah Polley talking about her new film and the fact that she has gotten to a point where, she used to be an actress and now she's a director, and she's gotten to the point where she will not hire someone if they're potentially toxic, no matter how great the artist is, because there's no, and we're getting to that point where we're going to start seeing that come up more, because people really are over everybody's shit. Quite frankly, we're over the diva shit, we're over the tantrums, we're over the asshole, the sexual abuser, the racist, and all. We're trying to get to a point where we're just cool as people. That's the end goal. Whether or not we ever get there, I don't know, but that's the goal that a lot of people are taking control of. You know what I mean?
Well, let me just say this. I think that the people that are shitheads get more press than the people who aren't. And so, like, I've worked in this business for 20 years. I've been a director and a producer that hires people. And my mantra for hiring anybody is, are you cool to hang out with?
Right.
More so than not, you don't have to be as good at what you do as the guy next to you or the girl next to you if you're cool to hang out with.
Right. Because, I heard you say something about that recently.
Yeah, man, because that's what it is. And so then I've never felt the need to defend who I hire on my productions, because it doesn't matter who they are, what their race is, where they come from. They're all cool people.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's the criteria.
Yeah.
And I think that what happens in our business is such a bipolar, shitty business. It's a piece of shit. And so what happens is that you come in with a dream, you come in with a vision, you try to find some sort of pathway. There's no fucking roadmap.
No.
It's all random. So you're trying to find this pathway, and then you're also dealing with your own sense of insecurity because you built up this mythical status around the business yourself as a child, where you're like, this is like heroes, and these are my heroes. So you come in with all this stuff. So when you come in, you get shit on pretty early on. No matter what, you're going to get shit on. Someone's going to go like, your idea is not good enough. This isn't great. I don't fucking care. And so then now your ego's hurt. And now your ego's in a really crappy place. And it depends on the type of person and what sort of ammunition you have to combat that.
Yeah.
There's so many people in our business that go, well, fuck you. And believe me, I'm an East Coaster, so there's a lot of anger in my motivation for doing things. And that's how I would always do it. I'm changing that now that I'm going through therapy. But so then you have these people who are like, well, fuck you. And so then they get pissed, and then they're behind the scenes. And then they start to get into like, well, now it's all about leverage. Now it's about desperation. And now I got to get my shit. And so then when they finally get to a position of power, they're like, it's my time, motherfucker. And so that anybody else that comes to interact with them, they're like, what have you fucking done? And so then it just continuously sort of passes.
Well, it's like any abusive, situation. There are people like, there are people that are abused early on, and they either become abusers or they're so fucked up, or some people manage to figure their shit out. But there's generally like it splits into generally two camps. You become that asshole that you didn't want to be because you were fucking tortured, or you become somebody that just can't maybe get past what you went through to some degree.
But let me jump in here real quick and say that I think it's dangerous to just sort of pass over the people that do a really good job processing it, because there are people that do a really fucking good job.
No, there are.
And what's interesting about it is you can go through the process of it's going to happen. Someone's going to shit on you. Something happens. Someone's going to reject your ideas. You're going to get knocked off your pedestal, and your ego is going to get put into check. With age, what you end up understanding is, all right, there's something to be learned here. And this is not going to devastate me. This is not going to change my life. This is not going to ruin my life. If I see this thing as a learning opportunity, then okay, all right.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to get there sometimes because it really fucking hurts.
Yeah.
And so when you look at these assholes that have been exposed in this business and really have fucked everything up, you look at these assholes, and it blows my mind that they have to get to the point where they're like jacking off in front of people in the shower. Like that's when people are like, oh, this is abhorrent. Well, what about all that other shit that person was doing for years prior to that, which was like being an asshole to the PAs, being an asshole to everybody that hangs out on set. Why is this asshole in charge? And ultimately, I think it's because, and this is going to be a risky statement, I think it's because assholes got shit done. And so when you're dealing with giant corporations and money people and stuff like that, they're like, this guy's an asshole, but he gets fucking shit done and he makes a lot of money for us.
Right. That used to be the main thing, is that's why somebody, and I'll just say, you don't have to say anything about it, but and it's not exactly a controversial statement at this point, but an exact personification of that was Harvey Weinstein. Sorry, Harvey Firestein. Harvey Weinstein was a notorious dick, and he almost wore it as a badge of honor. He was a dick to his people on the sets. He was a notorious dick for picking up films, shelving them, and they never saw the light of day. He was notorious for fucking with everybody's edits, and he was just a general dick. And I think back to what we found out about Harvey, and then I think back to this interview he did with Howard Stern years ago, when he was whatever the Weinstein company was putting out this movie. I think it was a documentary about bullies. It was a documentary. I don't really remember if the title was Bully or not. And the fact is that he was kind of sitting there on the couch saying, like, look, I know I've been kind of this person, but like we're at a level now where people, and I think what the deal with Harvey, and this could be a swing and a miss, but whatever the fuck happened to him as a kid, you know, something happened. I mean, I know he loved his parents. I mean, Harvey and Bob named Miramax based on their parents, but what the fuck happened to this guy that he became an actual monster, you
Well,
know?
I mean, I don't know the details, but I can honestly say that something did happen. And
Yeah.
and then when you're talking about, I think if there's anything good that's come out, well, there's been a lot of good, but I think if there's anything good for males that has come out of the whole cancel culture thing and everything that's happened, is that we're now allowed to be emotional. And
Yeah.
so there's this sense of which is wild, man. Like I'll sit down with like old school guys and we start to talk emotional. We get to this point where it's like very timid because we're just sort of like, am I allowed to? I can talk about this stuff, right? And so that really didn't exist prior to this. And
Yeah.
like I'll talk to a therapist and she's like, guys don't have places to go to do
Yeah.
this. Like
Well,
women,
you
okay,
weren't allowed to be emotional, even though even though, you know, as a 52-year-old, I've gone through the process where like the 80s were like, come on, you got to tell me what you're feeling, you know, for women would say to men. The thing is that we've had centuries and you know, good and bad, centuries and centuries of taught, you know, passed down behavior
yeah,
reinforced by books, by movies, by TV, by everything, that you have to be this. You have to be strong because back then you were protecting your family in the middle of fucking nowhere on a homestead
mhm,
from, you know, Native Americans who were probably just pissed off that you were stealing their land. So they
yeah.
were like just gonna, you know, but you had to be the provider, you had to be the protector, you had to be all these things. So you had to fucking suck it up, and whatever you felt, you know, I think like something like The Power of the Dog that I think Jade Campion directed that. I think that was such an amazing film about that exact thing, you know, the exact thing that, you know, here was this guy that he had to be something and he had to push every ounce of what he wanted to be and
Yeah.
who he really was down to the point where he was just a son of a bitch, you know, to everyone because he was filled with self-hate about having to live this lie. And that's the thing, you know, it's like you can't, as much as everybody wants to, you can't deny centuries of breeding and social, you know, structure and all that shit. You know, it's just not that way. And then you still get these people that expect right away. It's like, well, you said this, like that's very, you know, macho, or whatever. It's like, well, okay, you know, give me a chance. You know, like give me the opportunity to say, hey, I get that. You know, I'm trying. You know,
I mean, but once again, humans, right?
right?
So we tend to resort to black and white. That's what we
Yeah,
do. Like I have something that I need. This person has something that they need. So we're on
yeah,
opposite ends of the team. Like sports, everything that we celebrate, it's like this team versus this team, good guys
yeah,
versus bad. And when you sort of break it down that way, life doesn't require a lot of thought,
right,
right? You're just sort of like, all right, who do I vote for? A or B, blue or red.
right.
You don't overthink it. You don't have to go through the process of doing the research. Like, what's the team I like? What's the team I don't like? So it's very hard emotionally to be someone that lives in the gray, to be someone that lives in the middle. And my argument, and I piss a lot of people off with this fucking argument, where my argument is like, this is how I feel today.
Yeah,
I will hopefully be a different person a year from now. I will
yeah,
hopefully be a different person a year after that. Because if not, then I'm not learning and I'm not advancing and I'm not going through stuff. And I tend to be a person that it's dangerous to be this person these days. I tend to be a person that likes to say things to get rises out of individuals when I meet them, because I think a lot of people spend so much time crafting what it is their exterior,
yeah,
especially in a generation where they're resorting to an archaic form of communication, which is this bullshit text thing. But what they love about it is that they can sit there and they can edit this thing multiple times before they send it. So they're actually crafting how they're perceived by this person that has to read this sort of archaic form of communication, as opposed to if you're on the phone, or even better, if you're with that person in real life and you can't disguise the human nature, the ability to read physical appearance and body posturing and all that kind of stuff. So it's a weird place right now. And I think most of the young folks that I deal with are people that are younger than me that come to me for advice, or just like, how do you get sponsorships, or how do you convince actors to be in your stuff, or how did you get this? And I go, dude, you just hang out with them and you talk in real life, where you can't hide this world. You can't be in control of how people perceive you. And we're seeing that with everything that's going on socially, with people trying desperately to sort of identify themselves specific ways. It's like, I get it. It's all really good. It's all interesting. But at the end of the day, are you trying too hard to create this box to put yourself in? And then you're just as bad as the person who's at the other end of that box.
Right.
So how about you get out of it and sort of hang out here in the middle?
Yeah.
And it sucks. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard being in a position where you're like, well, shit, I thought that was the way things were, but I guess it's not. So now, what is it now? Like, that sucks. But that's the only way to interact with the scale of human beings that we have on this planet in a peaceful way. Really.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. Well, we're kind of getting a little long here. And I know you got something coming up, but I wanted to get to a couple of things. And you know, I would certainly love to have you on again down the road, because I think you know, you're somebody that we could just sit here and, you know, talk about whatever, and it doesn't matter. You know, if you're promoting something, you're not promoting, whatever. You know, you have an open invite to this show.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to know, one question is, you mentioned about, and you probably discussed this on your show at some point, but you mentioned about getting somewhere down the road with Ridley, with regards to 12 cam. Where did that end up going exactly? Or where did it not end up going, I guess?
So basically where we're at right now is that it's still at development at Scott Free.
Okay.
Those guys are very excited about it, but here's the politics and the bullshit that is our business. One, 12 cam is not a movie about people that smile. It's not a movie about, you know, the Hereditary family. It's not a simple film to make. It's not an easy. It's more like Alien meets The Thing meets, you know, Armageddon. You know what I mean? Like, so this sense of scale and scope that comes with this, that people are very timid to give to a first-time director. And so the mode has been make another movie first.
Yeah.
And so we've been in the process. We have another movie called Who's There?
Yeah.
Which was with James Wan for a little bit. Like, that one is very doable. It's very exciting, very fun. I'm shooting new pieces now. We're writing new pieces now. I've got some pretty cool pitches for stuff that's really fun. They want me to do a smaller feature first. And then after the smaller feature is done, it's easier for us to go, because it's financiers. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, and so then the financiers will go like, all right, so this kid knows how to, you know, fucking.
He's got something tucked under his arm now. Yeah.
Realistically. So
yeah.
That's been the move, and then everything slowed everything down. So COVID slowed shit down, everything's slowing down. So this year is going to be an interesting year to see out of the gate what happens. I know Carnahan and I are talking about stuff. He wants to do some stuff. So like, there's all sorts of shit that is in the works. 12 cam will happen. I don't think 12 cam will be my first. I think, and you know what, I'm kind of about that, because there's a lot of shit that I got to go through. And there's a
Well,
lot of I want to
wouldn't you
learn.
say that you kind of need to do something? You know, you're talking about something that is going to end up being maybe not, you know, very expensive or very as involved as some movies are, but maybe there is you know, say just say you're crossing a pond on different rocks, and you got to get to, you know, one
Yeah,
rock to get
yeah,
to the bigger rock, you know, to get to the other side, whatever, you know, whatever analogy you want to use. So maybe doing something else, yeah, is the right move before tackling something, so that you're actually fully prepared to take on whatever may come, you know, when you make 12 cam as a feature.
sure. I mean, it's nice to put that on me. This is what I'm going to take from it. But the reality of the scenario is this: when you're going to make a movie, you have to go through all these gatekeepers. So you have to go through agents and management. You got to go through financiers. You got to go through execs. You got to go through all these folks. And a lot of
Right.
these gatekeepers have their own idea based upon the past and their experiences of what they need. So
Right.
sit there and go, okay, so this guy's a first-time filmmaker. It can't be more than $2 million for his movie.
Right. Right.
That's why you see companies like Blumhouse and these other places that have business strategies that are 2 million and under business
Mhm.
strategy. And I think if you're a filmmaker that it's first time you get upwards of 5 million, you're very fortunate. There's some sort of lucky sort of step that happened along the way where you were able to
Yeah.
get there. Now I can hold out for that, and we've been doing that for quite some time because you start talking 12 camera range, you're in the $10 million low budget sort of
Mhm.
category for stuff. I mean, a movie like that could be a $30 million movie, but there's no fucking
Right.
way that they're going to give me that kind of money. So you have to be smart about what you're writing and the scale of what it is that you're writing
Right.
off. And so then, at this point, I'd say 12 Cam is like a $10 million movie. And so
Mhm.
for them to give me $10 million out of the gate, I know that if the dudes at Scott Free were financing things that way, they would write me a check and they'd be like, good to go.
Right. Right.
You have to go through, all these external places that have like
Right.
their own bullshit corporate structure, like agenda where you get
Yeah.
into that and you're not even talking to the money man. Like if
Right.
I in the room and I was talking to the guy that's going to write me the check and he'd feel the passion, he'd see my experience, and I'd be like, dude, look at all the effects I did for the short. How much do you think these cost? You know what I mean? And was able to like sort of walk through that stuff. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that person would go, here's a fucking check.
Yeah.
But there are these gatekeepers that are in between them and that are junior execs and assistants and readers. And that's how Hollywood works. That's why it takes so fucking long. And I think a lot of people don't realize this,
Yeah.
is that you're dealing with people that are put into a position of power that don't truly have any power. And so
Mhm.
then you're dealing with like a junior exec who's like, I love this idea. How about we work on the script together? And you're like, fuck yeah. As a young guy, you're like, all right, let's do it. So then you spend 6 months and you're rewriting and you're working it and you're doing this whole bit. And then the junior exec is like, this is great. This is really cool. And then he goes over to talk to his boss, and his boss is like, no, I don't want to do that. And he's like, but I don't want to do that. And he's just like, okay. And so then you get the phone call and he goes, we're not doing it. You go, well, what about the fucking promises in the 6 months? Oh,
Yeah.
wait, you don't physically have the power to do
Right. So
what?
how do you deal with that now? Knowing that that you have to go through these barriers. What do you hold back something? Do you not agree to uh do so much extra work with somebody that doesn't have the power to green light something? You know, how does that work for you?
Well, you have to be a lot more, you have to ask a lot more questions and you have to be a lot more specific. And you try to get to the point, the furthest point possible with something before you have to do the nitty gritty. But there's a lot of fucking realities. I think that Hollywood's incredibly lazy, and uh, being a screenwriter in this city is the worst because you're constantly told we're not going to buy off of an idea. We're not going to buy off a pitch. The only people that are selling pitches apparently are people that are pitching for larger, big Hollywood things that are tentpole things that are just pitches that you're then
Yeah.
putting through. But if you're doing something like a horror or low budget film, you have to spec the script. And
Yeah.
spec is a very fancy way of saying you
Oh,
have to
I
write it for fucking free.
yeah. Yeah. Did you ever see Tape Heads?
Oh, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. No.
Oh my God, you got to see it. It's hard to track down because it's not available streaming, but it is. You'd love it because I mean it's about people trying to become filmmakers, and it's about people that start with no money doing videos, and there's a whole segment about spec, which when I first saw the movie in 1989, I had no idea what the fuck spec was, and it's just hilarious. The movie is fantastic. So I urge you, find time to track down like eBay. You might have to buy a VCR to fucking watch
Yeah,
it, to be honest.
I love
But
it.
yes, I love spec. I love spec.
So, dude, you're in this position, right, where at some point you have to either write it yourself or convince your screenwriter to basically work for free for months and months.
Right,
And months.
right.
And what you do is you write out a spec, you deliver that spec to them, and then they look at that spec and they go, "This is great. We have ideas." And then you do a
Right.
whole new fucking rewrite. So it's like
Right.
everything you did for those 6 months for free are now going to be completely reformatted and rewritten. And so I've been through this process multiple times, and I hit this point where I was pitching I think it was my management team. They sent me a thing and they said, "Hey, check out this script. You would be interested, might be interested as a director to do the script." And I said, "Cool." But now I'm in that sort of cynical phase where I was saying to them, like, "Yeah, but what are my chances of getting this?" That's usually what I would start with.
Yeah,
And they go,
yeah.
"Well, your chances aren't that great because you haven't done a feature yet, but you should still go through the process of doing this." And I remember going like, "Okay." And so then I was at home and I read through the script and I just sort of wrote a couple things out and I sent it to him. And he's like, "What the fuck is this?" And I go, "This is what I think right now. I'm not going to get too invested in this because I don't think it's going to happen. So this is what I would do, and maybe they like what I would do, and maybe it goes from there."
Right.
He goes, "You can't do that, dude. You have to be fully invested 100%.
Right.
Go back through it, immerse yourself in it." And so then I was like, okay. And so then I read it. I was like, I'm fucking into this. And then I fell in love and I started to put together.
Sure.
And so then I loved the pitch and I showed it to him. And he goes, "That's what I'm talking about." Okay, cool. And so then he sends me in the room and I sit in front of these people and they read the pitch and they go, "It's really great." And I go, "Thanks." And they go, "There's a lot of really cool ideas here." And I go, yeah, fuck it. I'd love to make this movie. I see it in my head. Like I've given birth to what this thing is.
Yeah.
And they go, "Yeah, but you haven't made a feature yet. So we're not going to give this. But we really like all of your ideas. They're really great. But, come back to us when you've made a feature." And so then devastated, right? So like I've given birth to this baby that they slice its throat in the fucking corner. And they go, "Well, thanks for doing that." And you're like, "God damn it." And so then afterwards, you just plummet into depression. And you're just like, you have that instant sort of depression of like, well, I can't make this thing. And what the fuck's going on? And that's our business. Our business is like,
Yeah.
And as side note, that movie, I can't remember the name of it, but it came out last year. It was that exorcism movie that came out last year about a woman that was in the Vatican that was training to be an exorcist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the guy,
Diary of an Exorcism,
something like that, whatever the name was
yeah,
really
I don't know. I know what you're talking about. I remember something like that. I just can't remember the title exactly.
But the thing that's so hard about it is that you see that, and then you see who they end up going with, because on books it makes sense, on paper it makes sense, right? And so then you look at the stuff and you go, there's no life to this. There's no real voice in this thing. It's like paint by numbers. It's like you went and hired the commercial director that shot all the same sort of commercials that you are trying to make here, and there's nothing new about this. And then you just sort of realize afterwards, you go, well, that's the fucking business, and I have to be okay. And how do I navigate this business and not have every time that I go through that be so fucking devastating?
Yeah.
And that's just age. You don't want to be calloused. You don't want to become cynical, because no one wants to work with you if you're cynical and callous. Right. But at the same token, you also have to protect yourself in the back end and go, well, this isn't going to change my life. Fuck it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to, and it touches on what you just said, and then we'll stop it there, is, I recently saw the Damien Chazelle movie Babylon, which
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly loved. I picked it as my #1 movie of the
I
year.
haven't seen it. I haven't seen it
It's
yet.
it's so the fact is we're like somebody like Quentin Tarantino is right. We're in an age where bold is not often coming through. You don't see bold coming through. We're seeing safe, a lot of times. And for me, the sheer fact that Babylon went balls out crazy and still managed to end up providing a human emotional story even in the face of all the insane shit that goes on in the film, it is astounding. And of course it was met with nothing. It was met with it's like $10 million so far, and it cost 80. um but in the
That
film, I also
sucks.
saw it as an allegory, as much as it was about the silent to talkie version. I also see it as an allegory from um, the studio system that preceded the auteur, generation that begets, Scorsese and Coppola and Friedkin and all that stuff, and culminating in like, Heaven's Gate or something like that. Um, what I want to get your sense of is, do you think there's a way for that to happen again? Like we're going to be stuck in such a um formulaic, you know, flat line. This is what, you're going to go to this, you're going to get this beat, that beat, this beat, you're going to see this thing, you're going to see that thing. It's like a guaranteed that people are going to finally reject and say, look, somehow something cuts through, like an Easy Rider or a Bonnie and Clyde, what have you, and all of a sudden we're back in a renaissance again. Do you think that's even possible at this point with the way the movie business is?
Yeah, I think so. I think that at the end of the day, the thing that you can rely on is that the people that have money, I'm not going to make that statement. It's a really dead. The thing that you can rely on is that the folks that are financing these things are hyper focused on chasing trends. And that's
Yeah,
really down to like people get into this business not to make art right now. They get into this business like the folks that got into NFTs, like the people that were like hyper into NFTs. They didn't give a
yeah,
fuck. They don't give a fuck about art. They're trying to make fast cash, and they're trying to do it with as little effort as possible so that they
right.
can as much money as they can. And so we're seeing that straight across everything that we interact with, whether you're talking tech stuff or movie stuff or anything. So I think that as long as someone sneaks through the cracks, as long as there's something that catches fire,
Yeah,
um, that that takes us into that period, I think it will happen. And right now, the we're more in a marketing renaissance than we are in anything else. Where you've got movies like Megan that who the fuck cares about Megan? And like the only reason why anybody gave a shit about that was because they changed their marketing strategy and they went TikTok and they did the whole dance routine with it, and that's
yeah,
why I was amped about that. And so that now you have all these studios that 2 years ago, when we were out there trying to get a horror movie made, these places were like, we don't want to do horror stuff. Now it's the
yeah,
front center thing on everybody's docket this year.
yeah.
Every You'd be surprised the people that I've had meetings with that are like,
Well, last year was a semi renaissance for horror in itself. I mean,
sure,
it was the first year in a long time that I actually sought out horror films, because horror is just above rom-com for me in a lot of ways, because I'll be the guy cackling in a theater at every fucking horror trailer, because I'm like, it's just stupid people getting systematically killed, and
sure,
that's the thing. But and then I wrote a review of both X and Pearl, which I was cautiously into, but I didn't end up liking fully, because I think there was a lack of urgency to both films. But the fact that the people in Ty West films were not stupid, they were actually very with it, they were actually smart people, was at least a glimmer of, and I loved Barbarian. I thought Smile was going to be a lot better than it was. The trailers, the marketing was amazing.
Yeah.
And that movie blew up. So, obviously marketing worked.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the purpose.
but right, but there was a lot of horror going on that was trying to be a step above what has come before it, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, man. Like, I think that there's been a lot of really interesting horror movies that have been made for quite some time. There was a lot more important things that the industry wanted to tackle, in their
Right.
opinion. And so there was, after the whitewashing accusations of the Academy Awards and the industry in general, there were dockets that went out for 2 years that were like,
Yeah.
every movie that we do has to have a female lead. Every TV show that we do has to have um, for all that, and that was their push. And
Right.
innovative stuff, they were just trying to fill the docket to prove to the world that, like, hey, even though there's a white guy behind that door in the back, look how inclusive we
Yeah.
are. And
Yeah.
okay. That was like the big move for 2 years. And I think we're finally getting to a point where the pendulum is sort of swinging back towards the center again. And people are like, all right, we're tired of all this social media stuff. Can we sort of come back and get into a bit more escape? And I think those horror movies that were coming out at the end of last year that were successful was because of that. And I think that now with the new attention this year, the new attention this year is marketing. And so it's like, what can you come up with elevator pitch that can be simply TikToked, that can be simply put out there where an audience goes fucking nuts for it. And they really don't give a shit. And I'm not saying that these places aren't hyper focused on what the screenplays are and the scripts are.
Right.
Most of the time they're like, let's just do a formulaic thing that follows these specific structures with a really hot idea that we can TikTok and we can do really intense, because the marketing is what's going to make us the $900 million on a $2 million or $4 million.
So thereby the marketing elevates something over what it may have been without the certain look, the certain creative spin on marketing, if it weren't there.
Dude, take it. We'll bookmark this whole thing by bringing it back to my thing, right? So I made a movie in 2016 about a Russian drill team that dug the deep hole known to man. It's all in Russian. Everybody speaks in Russian. The movie's fucking subtitled. There's only one woman in the film, and she's fantastic. The rest are all dudes. There's all sorts of weird sort of stuff that happens at the end. I don't want to give it away. And no one would give a fuck. Like if I put that out on YouTube and just put it there, no one would give a shit.
Right. It would just flatline. Yeah.
The only reason why anybody gives a fuck about that movie was because of the viral marketing that happened with that film and people feeling like they're inclusive and they're feeling like they're included in this thing. And my movie's great. And people watch the movie afterwards and they go, we love it. It's really great. But it was the marketing that put them in the frame of mind to actually enjoy the film. Would E.T., and this is what I said on one of my episodes, would E.T. still be E.T. today if it wasn't marketed to us the way it was, if they didn't have the deal with Reese's Pieces and it was just dumped on fucking streaming services?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's an awful lot on streamers that, like, to the point where it's like, I think even though if there's a director or a cast attached that I'm interested in, it's like it's on to use an unfortunate title of a film I was very against, despite its boldness. It's all white noise. It's like it's there. And the problem has gotten that somebody like Netflix does so many damn films at this point that they don't even bother doing much in the way of publicity. Like I was back and forth with somebody that's going to be a guest that did something for Netflix. And like they said, well, look, go to Netflix PR, first. Let's try to go through them and set up the interview. And then the guy wrote me back like weeks later, a month later, and like, did they ever get back to you? I'm like, no, they hardly ever get back to me. It's like they have the people they want to market to, and that's it. And they don't care.
Yeah, I go through the same shit. Who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Like you sort of hit you go, okay. So once you do something that's great, once 12 Cam went viral, then I was getting calls from all the Hollywood places, all the Hollywood stuff. They're like, what's this movie? I'm like, this movie's been around since 2016. The only reason you give a shit about it now is because, all right, I get it. I get the game. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so like, dude, I don't know, man. Like at the end of the day, you can't, like, one thing I'm trying to learn is that I can't take it all personally. And as you sort of navigate this business, you start to understand why people are in it, what it is that they're doing, what their goals are. This is a world where there's no rules, there's no path. And so everybody's floundering around and then trying to satisfy their own insecurities by putting on a defense system where it's like, we know fucking system to do this. We know what it is that we're doing. And this is the success rate. I was talking to a young producer the other day, and he was talking about watching this bit with Jerry Bruckheimer. And I haven't seen it yet. I think he's on like a Hollywood Reporter roundtable or something. Mm-hmm. And this is a quote from someone who saw it, so bear with it. But he was like, Bruckheimer's sitting at a table with all these young producers. And all these young producers were talking about how they're the shit and like, how they figured out specific formulas in order to make successful movies and how to chase trends and do this stuff. And Bruckheimer, who's been doing it for years, and this is the guy that's made every fucking movie from my childhood, like all that stuff. Yeah. He just sits there and goes, I don't know what's going to work. And he goes, no one knows what's going to fucking work.
Yeah.
And he find something that we respond to, we find something that we like, and we just take a chance. And that's this business. No one knows what the fuck's going to happen. And so like, once you sort of get that in your head, you stop being so precious about these things that you're putting out there, then you can survive it a little bit easier. You know?
Yeah.
I'm sure that Bruckheimer has his own fucking therapist. I'm sure he has all his own shit that he's got to go through. But
yeah.
It's a shit.
No, I hear you.
Bottom line, it's a dog shit business. Why would you want to get into it?
Yeah. Right. No, I get you. And and exactly, but it's like I'm already formulating I set a goal for myself to, by the beginning of March, I have to be done with my next script. That's like good, that's a tight time, and I haven't written one word yet, but because I'm still formulating how to the certain things I want to get to. But I want to write 2 scripts this year. It took me 5 years to write the one because it was a personal story that I mogrified into a classic narrative, but there's a lot of personal shit in there. So it was about letting go of a certain relationship, too. So it took a lot of power, and I down to the wire, New Year's Eve night, I finished it. It's like I had like 15 more pages of shit I could have written, and I said, fuck it, I'm going to end it here. And I was done, so I want to, I just wish I was, had been able to tell myself as a teenager, keep fucking writing, keep writing. Don't stop. Don't worry. Don't let your fear. That's a big thing with me. Don't let your fear interrupt what your dreams are, at the very least. Even if nobody ever does anything with it, you got to write for yourself or do something for yourself first.
Well, and then there's something else to also take into consideration. And this is something I deal with consistently. Like yesterday, I was editing this new piece, and you have to remind yourself that like, it's never going to go the way you planned it to go.
Right.
You're going to hit a point when you're looking at your material and you're looking at your stuff and you're going to go, this is shit. Like they're always, it doesn't matter how good it is. You get in the edit room, you get into a space, you look at it and you go, this is dog shit. And it's at that moment where the inner side of you, like the darker side of you, starts to take over. And it's like, well, what have you been wasting all your life for? And what have you been wasting all your time? And there's so much involved with this. This is supposed to be an important thing. And what experience does is it gives you the ammunition to be like, I know I could still make something great out of this.
Yeah.
I know that there's still something that's really great that can be done. And so if you can, that's the hardest place. If you can get past that part where you start to beat yourself up because it's not looking the way you thought it was going to look, because we're putting ridiculous expectations on ourselves to make it perfect at that stage. Stuff is never fucking perfect until it's done. And even then it's perfect. And so if you can convince yourself to get over the insecure and the negative aspects of it, then your mind opens up. Like, dude, I have a whole sequence in this movie that I'm doing right now where I watched it last night. I'm like, dude, this is too long. It's not good. I'm going to have to cut the sequence out. And the people around me are like, dude, that sequence is going to be amazing. And I'm like, it's not fucking good. I'm going to have to cut it out. And, you know, I got really great advice from my girlfriend. And she's like, stop thinking about it right now. Stop. You're in a spiral. Why are you thinking about this right now? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'll go to bed.
Yeah.
And so when I relaxed and I thought about it, I was like, oh, all I have to do is just shoot this little moment. And then I started to think about that moment. And I was like,
right,
this is cool. And then that's fucking rad. And so then because I got over that thing,
right,
now I have a whole new day of shooting that I'm excited to do.
yeah,
And I know that I inject this into the movie in this, you know, small piece that I'm doing. That lull will become the most interesting part of the entire movie now if I go through the process of making this work.
yeah. So you have a situation where you could either sit there and keep digging yourself into this hole there, where you're not only a metaphysical but an emotional hole where you're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to do anything, and then you either have to stop and realize, like, hey, you got to stand back, you got to look. That's why with my script, I know it's flawed. I've sent it off to a few screenwriters and a certain director I know. I've sent it off to a friend that I'm waiting to hear back. I know it's not perfect. I know it's maybe just, if at best, it's just good. You know what I mean? I know it needs a lot of work. I'm 52 years old almost. I'm not in denial that, I'm not saying I'm going to win a fucking Oscar for this thing, or it's going to sell for $1 million. I'm not in that point. I know what my limitations are. And the idea is that, but I want to take some time. I want to write something else, maybe 2 other things before I even come back to it, and then start, revisiting what I did. Cause I need to get away from the goddamn thing after 5 years,
Well, if you can get yourself, yes, I think you're right. And I think if you can get yourself into a place where it's not about writing to finish it, it's not about writing to make it, because we can get into a whole long conversation about screenwriting is, if the process is you just writing, like if you just enjoy sitting down and starting a scene and just going from A to B in that scene and crafting that, and that becomes your skill. Your skill is the guy that goes, I can write a murderous scene. Then that is what you're doing. And so then you're writing to get a movie made. You're not doing, like, this is something that I had to deal with when I'm doing treatments for films. You spend so much time concepting and storyboarding and writing treatments and doing stuff, and then you send it out. And originally I was doing that to get the movie made. Like, the reward of all of this work was to get that film made. That was the reward. And when does that ever happen? So I'm never getting the reward from it. I'm like, okay, so this isn't paying off. So now my new mindset is, I'm going to put together a treatment book, and the reward is having the treatment book done.
Right.
So that's what I'm working for. I don't give a fuck if it's going to be made. I don't give a fuck if it's going to go somewhere. Of course I do. But mentally, I'm keeping
you have to be in that place where you're not focusing on the something that you can't make happen.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm at. I'm a lazy kind of person by nature. And the fact is that the reason why I said I want to complete something is because that's for me. It's like my thing, because if I don't keep writing and if I don't keep completing things, I'm just going to stop with the one and say, well, at least I did a goal, and I don't want to do, I don't care if it gets made, I want to just keep writing. So I'm writing at this point. you
That's
know.
good.
But anyways, what we've talked a lot. You're pretty much at your window where you need to go. I appreciate you, Mike, for coming on the show. Check out mikepecci.com. Check him out at on Instagram. In Love with the Process of the podcast. It has all his links and all his stuff. Hit him up on Instagram with your 3 horror movies to check out 12 km, and then go back and listen to the episode with Carnahan to see what he did, because it's, I think, going to be better if you see the film and then hear
Sure.
how you made what you did. But Mike, it's a pleasure. The open door policy. If you ever need anything, let me know. Just, hit me up. We're all good, here, and it's been a true pleasure having you on the show.
Well, dude, I appreciate it. It's been a really great conversation. And I will say this to tag it on there. You were mentioning that there are so many episodes that we do. If you want to, and if you're a new listener, if you go to inlovewiththeprocess.com, I've done the hard work for you, lazy people. There is a top 30 episode section there. So like Peter Snare interviews there. There are all sorts of really great spots. So like if you're trying to dip your toes in the water, that's the place to go.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate you again. I hope you have a great day and good luck with everything, and stay in touch.
Thanks, my man. It was really good talking to you.
Good talking to you. All right. You have a good one.
See you, bud.
All right. Bye.